Hello there. Welcome to my review of the 1996 film The Phantom, starring Billy Zane as Kit Walker, the Phantom, Kristy Swanson as love interest Diana Palmer, Treat Williams as villain Xander Drax, Catherine Zeta-Jones as femme fatale Sala, with Patrick McGoohan as the ghost of Kit Walker's father. It was directed by Australian Simon Windsor, who had previously directed Free Willy and several episodes of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and written by acclaimed writer Jeffrey Boehm, whose credits include The Dead Zone, The Lost Boys, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and who sadly passed away in 2000 at the age of 53. So the spoiler-free review. The Phantom is a fairly enjoyable romp, but in the same mould as The Shadow and The Rocketeer of big-budget period piece superhero films that don't manage to connect with the audience. In my opinion, The Phantom is the weakest of the three, not having the endearing charm of The Rocketeer or the enigmatic cool of The Shadow. It's probably the most action-packed of them, but the action scenes tend to go on for much longer than necessary and don't really add much to the story. Billy Zane is good as a lead, as good as Alec Baldwin or Bill Campbell, but Kristy Swanson isn't nearly as compelling as Penelope Ann Miller or Jennifer Connelly, and isn't given much depth or that much to do, burdened somewhat by Catherine Zeta-Jones being a much better female character.
Happy now? Get a good look.
Treat Williams does a fine job during the scenery, and the supporting cast of character actors all do a good job. But the ending isn't particularly well staged and bears little relevance to the rest of the plot. The plot is basic stuff. Villain wants to rule the world, hero has to stop him. But even so, it's very by the numbers, which is surprising when it was written by the incredibly talented writer Jeffrey Boehm, who had a talent for spinning gold from a basic structure into an interesting plot. But the plot ideas are left dangling, characters are left underdeveloped or undeveloped, and there's too much mythos to cram into the relatively short running time to be left satisfied by. Having said that, it is still enjoyable enough watch, it just leaves you a little frustrated. I can't say this is nothing but the best or worst, so I would have to rate it as nothing but quite good. So on to spoilers. First, a little history of The Phantom. The Phantom was created by artist Lee Falk for King Features after the success of his previous character, Mandrake the Magician, both of whom would appear in the 80s cartoon series Defenders of the Earth, alongside other King Features characters Flash Gordon and Lothar, as well as their kids. The film follows the original backstory of the character pretty faithfully, with the Phantom seemingly immortal, but in fact being a normal man whose title passes from father to son upon the father's death to give the appearance of immortality. He is aided by his animal helpers Devil the Wolf and Hero the Horse, as well as his friend Guren, and in the film the ghost of his dead father who only he can see. James Remar appears as Quill, one of Xander Drax's henchmen, and the man who killed Kit Walker's father, and he kicks off the film after a voiceover prologue from Patrick McGoohan. Quill, along with two others, is searching for a silver skull, reported to have magic powers in true Indiana Jones fashion, and this, along with a child guide they endanger on several occasions, brings them into conflict with the Phantom, or the Ghost Who Walks. He is the protector of the jungle that they happen to be in. This opening sequence serves as a fine introduction to the Phantom, but just goes on for too long. There's a long sequence of them crossing a rickety bridge, a cave with booby traps, a pursuit by the Phantom, ending with the bridge again. It attempts to set up the Phantom and the MacGuffin of the skull in one go, while delivering an action sequence, but we get no character development of the Phantom. And the skull is one of three skulls they are seeking. It doesn't really do the job. Quill exclaims that he killed the Phantom in this sequence and at several other points in the film.
Who was that guy?
Somebody I already killed.
What?
You heard me. I killed him. I know I killed him once.
He stabbed me in the back. Literally.
I once killed the Phantom.
And all we really learn about the Phantom is that he's a hero. Because of this, the film then has to reintroduce him and the Skulls in the very next scene, as well as the romantic lead and the villain, which is another overly long sequence. There's so much repetition in the first act of this film, it not only becomes quite dull, it also massively eats into the plot. The Phantom then has to rescue love interest Diana Palmer from a boat after she's been kidnapped from a plane, and we meet Zeta Jones' air pirate Salah, which ends in another overly long action scene. All of this could have been trimmed into a few scenes. If it was me, I'd have Quill steal the skull, but instead of being pursued by the Phantom, he's outwitted by Diana Palmer, who is an adventurer herself. Establish the magic skull, set up Diana as the female Indiana Jones, taking the skull from Quill to put in a museum, setting her at odds with the Phantom, who wants it returned to where it was stolen from. Instead of Drax killing a librarian who passed information on to Palmer's newspaper mogul uncle about Drax, maybe being a criminal, after a scene where her uncle and Drax meet, have him kill someone just for annoying him or something trivial like that, and cut out the introduction to the uncle completely. Have the Phantom find out about the theft too late, and so research what the skull is, and then find out that the skull and Palmer have been kidnapped mid-air, as in the film. The introduction of Salah and the other air pirates is the best part of this act. Trimming the escape would also allow some more time for actual character development for these characters. They're all off to New York next to find the next skull, which is in a museum, and if they tied that into Palmer being the one who found it, that would have continued the conflict between her and the Phantom. The subtext of the nature of colonialism would have given the film just a little of the depth it lacked. We get another scene of Drax being evil, which again is largely unnecessary and adds yet more characters that are also underdeveloped, this time a mob boss, and unlike Paul Sorvino in The Rocketeer, who has an epiphany when he finds out he's been working for the Nazis, this mobster is just another henchman. So the Phantom and Drax both head to the museum in broad daylight to take the skull that's there. The Phantom being out of costume as Kit Walker, it combines with the skull Drax has and points out the location of the third skull. We then get the villain taking Walker and Palmer back to his lair, where Walker escapes and gets into costume, but not before Drax leaves with Palmer as his hostage. This middle act is basically the same as the first act, but with more characters introduced, and feels as repetitious as it is. It might have been better to use this to reveal that Palmer was also working for Drax, not knowing he was the villain, and introduce her uncle at this point, who reveals Drax's true nature. Walker is established as an old friend of the family who knew and was romantically involved with Diana in college, so that would all still work. Spend a little more time in New York. Use this time to reveal Drax's motive of wanting world domination, but give him a reason why. In this section there is a great scene where Palmer asks Salah why she is the way she is, and it gives Salah a real moment of contemplation.
He's probably dead by now.
What is wrong with you? Why are you so mean? Don't you care about anything?
Like what?
You figure it out.
Which leads to her later turn from villainy. And that's done really well, with a great performance from Zeta Jones. Unfortunately, these moments are few and far between. The Phantom also finds out from his dad's ghost that Quill was the one who killed him. If this had been the first time we've heard of it, and it had been established earlier that Walker was more concerned with finding his father's killer, this would have been a more powerful scene. It establishes that the father is an actual ghost, not just a manifestation of guilt Walker feels for not avenging his father, which kind of works, but the film might have been better for the latter being the case. If Walker had found out on his own, and bringing Quill to justice meant his father could rest, in his mind, it would have tied up that plot strand a little more neatly. The final act of the film begins as Drax heads for the location of the final skull on an island in the Devil's Vortex, a Bermuda Triangle-like area, and takes Palmer hostage, along with Quill and Salah, while the Phantom clings on to the outside of their seaplane. As it turns out, the island is the secret base of the Seng Brotherhood of pirates, who have been mentioned several times and are sworn enemies of the Phantom, but have not been involved at any point in the film, beyond passing mentions up until now. In the film, the Brotherhood have to be antagonists for both sides, so they don't just give up the skull, which I think is why they aren't in the film up until now. But it doesn't really work. One option is to not have them in it at all, and just have them find the skull, but that means one less fight scene, and one more repetitive scene of them just finding a skull. The other, and my preference, would be to reveal Quill to be one of the Brotherhood at this point. He does reveal that he is sort of one of the Brotherhood, or at least wants to be. But if he had been working for them all along, or that Salah is the Brotherhood leader's daughter, even if she is having second thoughts, and either of them had been manipulating Drax to thinking he was looking for the third skull, but was actually delivering the other two to the Seng Brotherhood, that would have been more satisfying. Having Drax be easily dispatched by the Phantom instead of the Seng Brotherhood chief would have made more sense, as Drax is clearly no match for the Phantom, but the Brotherhood are. Or having Quill easily dispatched by the Phantom, thus resolving the murder of his father, and them having Salah fight with her father, thus establishing her villainy turned into redemption by killing her abusive father, or deciding to turn on Drax while Phantom fights the Brotherhood leader. Any of these options would have been better, depending on how it was woven through the rest of the film, than what actually occurs in the film. So Salah, Palmer and the Phantom escape after the Phantom defeats Drax using his skull ring as the fourth skull, which is a little cheap and again could have been subtly established at some other points during the film. Or if Palmer had been the one who worked it out, it would have given her something to do. That would have been preferable. It finishes with Walker revealing his true identity to Palmer, who knew all along, and then she leaves with Salah, who presumably now also knows. It would have been nice if there was a little more ambiguity as to who he might end up with, as Salah seemed to have more chemistry with him, and her, to be honest, but he spells out the fact that he will end up with Palmer. If they'd hinted that he'd also been involved with Salah in his past, or that she was interested in him, we might have been able to have a little more fun with it. It would have been even more interesting if Palmer and Salah's chemistry had been explored. That doesn't really work for the overall narrative, but another option would have been to remove any of the chemistry between Salah and Walker and reveal her to be Walker's sister, thus making her a potential rival for Palmer's affections and potentially entitled to inherit the Phantom title. As it is, the film just ends there. There are many roads this film could have taken that it didn't, and plenty of things it hints towards without really committing to, and so it feels like a bit of a rush job, script-wise, which is a shame because it had so much potential to explore so many themes. It ends up being very throwaway, without being explicitly bad, which is why I can't really praise or damn the film. If they ever do have another go, hopefully they'll do better with the character, because it's quite a compelling character, and with the themes of legacy, tradition and colonialism, as well as sky pirates, sea pirates and industrial pirates, there's a lot going on. We can but hope the Ghost Who Walks will be resurrected one day. Thank you. Goodbye.